My mother-in-law tried to insult me before my wedding. You want to know exactly what she called me? A third world illiterate! As a child, marrying a non-Chinese man had always been my fantasy. I always envisioned myself in a big happy family other than the one I grew up in. But when I finally met a man that loved me and cherished me, his mother swore that she'd be a pain in the butt. My husband and I met in college some years ago. Although we weren't dating back in college, we were friends who saw each other once in a while. 2 years after we graduated from college, Stephan and I became very close friends, and from there our relationship bloomed into something more intimate. I loved everything about Stephan, and I was always eager to meet his family. He was an only child, and he talked about his parents a lot. The first I met Stephan's family, both his parents received me warmly. As of then, they did not know Stephan and I were a thing and must have assumed that we were only close friends whom he brought home, but after his mother found out Stephan and I were dating, her attitude towards me changed. Prior to this time, I had heard and watched movies of mother-in-laws treating their daughter-in-law badly, and I never imagined such a thing would happen to me. Each time I visited Stephan's family and she gave me a tough time, Stephan would always make excuses for her. In the beginning, he said that she was not used to having somebody take his attention like that. But it did not make any sense because she used to welcome me warmly because, well, before she knew that we were in a relationship. He claimed that I was the second official girlfriend that he's brought home to meet his parents, so it was the reason she acted that way. Stephan's father, Jacob, on the other hand, was always nice to me. He always welcomed me and treated me with love. I never felt out of place or awkward around him like I felt around Stephan's mother, Aurora. A couple of months after I met Aurora and Jacob, I found out the reason Aurora did not like me was because I was Chinese and she was American. By not liking me, I mean she did not like me enough to date her son, and I did not think I was the perfect fit for him. There was a lady Stephan was engaged to one time, but things did not work out well between them. She was American, and Aurora loved her. To mock me, she would go as far as mentioning Mia whenever Stephan invited me over to his parents' place, and it would always ruin the moment. According to Aurora, Mia was like a demigod. She was pretty, spoke fluent English, and did not have a thick Chinese accent like me. Mia also dressed better and was not obsessed with culture and tradition like I was. It was almost like she found something new to compare or complain about each time we met. The only reason I never took her seriously was because she always said them like a joke, and she would cover up with a laugh afterward. Stephan and Jacob never suspected that meant any of the things that she said. Though I was never comfortable with her subtle blows, I never took them to heart, because Stephan always defended his mother, and I'd witnessed her good side. In fact, he could have sworn that his mother was not trying to be racist and that she really treated everyone equally, irrespective of where they came from. For the 2 years that we dated, I continued to tolerate Aurora's subtle racism, hoping that she would accept me one day and stop comparing me to Stephan's ex-fiancé, but things escalated. There were even times that she made degrading comments, and her husband would tell her that she sounded like a racist, but she would chuckle, laugh it off like it was nothing. For example, when Stephan proposed to me and we announced to them that we were already planning a wedding, Aurora flared up and said she could not imagine having grandkids that would look like a puffball. I knew she was referring to me, but I pretended like I did not know what she meant. Sometimes she would openly insult me looking Japanese and Korean. Several times I tried to subtly tell her that I was Chinese, not Korean or Japanese, but she would take offense and say that I wasn't proud of my Asian roots. I knew she didn't want me to marry Stephan. She was even surprised that our relationship worked to the extent of wanting to get married. Since Stephan and I were two different people from different backgrounds, she expected that we would end things sooner rather than later. But the truth was, Stephan and I were very compatible and we loved each other so much. Also, we were very determined to make things work between us, especially since we came from different backgrounds and held different beliefs. Aurora started showing her true colors when Stephan and I began to plan our wedding. As my mother-in-law-to-be, She insisted that she wanted to be a part of the wedding planning, and I agreed to it. I didn't know I had just agreed to have a disastrous wedding plan. Since Stephan is a Christian and I'm not, I wanted our wedding to be a combination of Christian marriage and a traditional marriage. A priest would wed us, but instead of wearing the traditional European white wedding gown, I wanted to dress according to my traditional gown, and Stephan would wear a suit. This was meant to be a very special wedding for us, and it was something that I used to talk about even before I knew that we would get married. When Aurora learned about our plan, she made a fuss about it. She said that if I wanted a traditional marriage, then I would have to go back to China to have it. Stephan and I thought it was a joke until she said that she would absolutely not attend our wedding if we insisted on having a combination of a Christian marriage and a traditional marriage. Jacob had no issues. He respected our decision and supported us with whatever we wanted to do. But with Aurora, it was a very big problem. She was a devoted Christian, the kind that did not think it was right for a man and woman to move in together before marriage. Stephan knew this, and that was why he never mentioned that we've been living together for more than a year. Else, she would have said something or done something even more crazy. And concerning the wedding plans, Aurora did not end there. She insisted that I had to wear a white gown, and after a lot of persuasion from Stephan, I agreed. Stephan asked me to do so because he didn't want me and his mother to always be butting heads. He actually thought that I did all the things she wanted me to do. Then she would go ahead and accept me. Well, Aurora never accepted me. She was more concerned about my Chinese roots, and a lot of my time she would insult Stephan for shutting his eyes to pick a wife. After I finally agreed to wear a white wedding gown instead of my traditional gown, Aurora started making a fuss about our wedding location. We had plans to either have a beachside or a garden wedding because of the financial cost of renting a fancy hall, but when I told Aurora about it, she called Stephan on the phone immediately and started yelling at him. She said that we could not have a beachside or garden wedding because we would come off as broke people. I was shocked because I had seen many rich folks and garden weddings, and I always admired it. Aside from the financial responsibility of renting a fancy wedding hall, I would have still preferred a garden wedding if we had the money. It was a simple yet classy, and I loved it. Stephan always wanted a garden wedding too. In fact, before we told Aurora about the wedding location, we had already marked out 2 possible places in mind. They were both beautiful, and I tried to explain to Aurora that a garden/beachside wedding was what we wanted, and we already planned for it. I expected that she would listen to me and understand that our wedding was strictly about us and not about her, but she kept on pressing, and at that point I was so frustrated, I unconsciously yelled at her and spoke a bit of Chinese to her. Immediately I yelled at her, and she clapped her hands dramatically and started laughing. She said she knew I was pretending the whole time, and she would tell Stephan that I just insulted her. Honestly, I felt bad that I yelled at her, especially since she was about to be my mother-in-law, and I thought she was bluffing about calling Stephan, but she wasn't. Not at all. Right in front of me, Aurora took out her phone and called Stephan and pretended to sob. She made me look like the bad person and she was the victim. Then she said all forms of mean things about me in my presence, and when she ended the call, she blatantly said, "Let's see if you'll still have a wedding to plan." And she walked away from me. Seriously, guys, I was so scared that day because of what Aurora said to Stephan, but when I went home to meet Stephan, he did not make a fuss about it as I expected. Instead, he hugged me and told me that he knew his mother was giving me a tough time, and I must have reacted that way because of the pressure. It was such a relief to see Stephan act that way. At least he was not as senseless as Aurora, who thought she had manipulated him to break up with me. Also, I discussed the issue of Aurora trying to force us to rent a wedding hall, and he promised to talk to her. When we met Aurora and Jacob the following day, she was upset to see me on good terms with Stephan. She said that she expected Stephan would do something to teach me a lesson for yelling at her, and my yelling at her showed that I would be a disrespectful wife in the future, so it was better Stephan did something to teach me a lesson. At that point, Stephan understood why I yelled at her. She was so annoying, and she wanted things her way always. Funnily enough, she didn't tell her husband what had gone wrong, and when he asked, he was furious that she was still holding on to something like that. For peace to reign, Stephan asked me to openly apologize to her, and immediately I did, and she walked out of all of us without saying a word. Jacob followed her, and we heard a loud argument from inside. Minutes later, she came back to us and sat like a kid who had her candy snatched. Because of the heat, Stephan could not talk about the wedding venues as we planned, and he was more concerned with his mother being calm. He even assured me that he would talk to her on his own another day. After the day passed, I had to meet with Aurora again to discuss other things pertaining to the wedding. She wanted to be included in everything, including the kind of music that we would have on our own wedding. Meanwhile, I didn't know that Aurora had gone behind my back for cake tasting, and she had already picked 3 flavors and the size of the cake for my own wedding. As if that wasn't enough, she showed me the picture of the wedding gown design she wanted me to wear. She had like 7 different pictures on her phone, which she downloaded from Pinterest, of course. At this point, I could not take it anymore. For me, it was the last straw that broke that camel's back, and I already had enough of her. This time around, I did not yell at her. I simply walked out of her. She didn't even tell me that she was bringing an event planner and that this was the most upsetting part. When I reached home that day, I saw 19 missed calls from her and a couple of messages, and in one of the messages it said bad luck, because she said I stood her up with a very important personality. I responded, I'm sure you don't need me since it's your wedding you gotta plan. I knew she would call Stephan, so whatever, I didn't even bother calling him. About an hour later, Stephan called to ask what happened, and I explained everything to him. He was obviously angry that his mother went for a cake tasting and picked up gown designs, and she had already reached out to an event planner and decorator to take care of the wedding hall that she booked. I didn't even know that she had booked the wedding hall until Stephan and I went to his parents' house that evening. Stephan was obviously not happy with Aurora, and when we got there, he asked to talk to her in private while I waited in the living room. Before I could wrap my head around what was going on, Aurora starts yelling at Stephan, and she said that I was controlling him. She literally made a scene, and Jacob was forced to ask what was going on. When Jacob asked, Aurora did not say anything. She refused to speak, so Stephan told his father what Aurora had done. He explained to Jacob that Aurora and I were supposed to plan the wedding together, but lately, Aurora has been insisting that things had to go her way. She even booked a wedding hall against our back, and already picked out 3 cake flavors for the wedding. Jacob was angry, and he yelled at Aurora in front of us. He said that we did not have to do anything Aurora wanted if we didn't like it, because the wedding was about us and not Aurora. He insisted that his wife would no longer plan the wedding with me, since she wanted to mess things up for Stephan and I so badly. Immediately, Jacob said that. Aurora starts to yell, and speaking to no one in particular, she said that she would never attend a Chinese wedding, not while she was alive, and she said so many hurtful things to me. That was the first time I saw Stephan talk back to his mother. In front of me and his father, he told Aurora to her face that she did not have to come to the wedding if she wanted. He grabbed my hand and we left the house. As we left, I could hear her mumbling some words, but we didn't wait to listen. Now, the reason I'm sharing this story here is because Aurora has been sending me terrible messages since Stephan left their house about 2 months ago. Since then, Stephan and Aurora have not been on good terms, and they have not spoken to each other. Every time Stephan goes home to visit them, Aurora either goes grocery shopping or goes out to hang with her friends at that exact particular time. It's pretty obvious that she's been avoiding Stephan and me, and this is not the kind of relationship I wanted to have with Stephan's family. In one of her messages, she called me a homewrecker and a divider, and since then I've not been able to shake it. Our pre-wedding party and wedding is in a week, and to be honest, I wanted Aurora to attend our wedding. I've talked to Stephan several times and tried to apologize to his mother, but he has been insisting that we don't need have a successful wedding or marriage. I know we don't need her, but I feel terrible for causing issues between a mother and a son. Am I the a-hole for not agreeing to all the things that Aurora wanted? I just wanted this wedding to be special for me and Stephan. Update number 1. Hello everyone. Thank you for your comments. I took time to read every single one of them. Yes, you're all right. I don't need Aurora in my wedding for it to be successful, and I understand that she was very overbearing. The truth is, I said that because of Stephan and not only because of Aurora. Since he had the disagreement with his mother, he's been very different, and he's no longer the same. It feels so awkward that a man who used to talk about his mother and have a good relationship with her suddenly says nothing. Even when he goes to visit his father, he comes home with a dull look, and I know it has everything to do with him not talking to his mom. I also understand that he wants us to have our own wedding, and we can do that. He just needs to explain to Aurora that the plans we made will make us happy, and I'm sure she'll understand. Anyways, I texted Aurora earlier today, and she responded. Stephan doesn't know I've reached out to her, and tomorrow we'll be visiting her to apologize. I believe she's acting this way because she's elderly and she expects us to come to her. Some of you have said that I should leave her alone because she's racist and she doesn't want me to marry her son. I don't really think Aurora is a bad person. For the few times I've met her before Stephan, I disclosed that we were dating, she treated me very nice and with love. Maybe she's just mad that Stephan should have married somebody else. She thinks I'm too Chinese for her son, and she mocks my English accent all the time. But I learned that if you love a man, then you must love and accept his family. If we try to apologize to Aurora this time, and she tries to control or detect things from us again, well, I will leave her alone. I don't want to be that person that'll dig my own grave with my hands. I just want my Stephan to be happy, that's all. It's our big day, and I want things to go the way that, well, we had all imagined. Maybe I'm being too nice, but I hope I'm making the right decision. Meanwhile, our pre-wedding party is in 2 days, and I'm super excited. I'll be wearing my traditional wedding gown, and we'll be having a beautiful garden wedding just like we wanted. I'm so happy that things turned out, well, our way, and Stephan was even apologizing for trying to convince me to wear a white wedding gown to please his mother. He had no idea that she would go extreme to change the rest of our wedding plans. Update number 2. Hello, everybody. I hate to say this, but I should have listened to you guys. I guess I don't learn until something bad happens. You were all right. Aurora is worse than I imagined, and I should have allowed things to remain the way it was. So yesterday, Stephan and I went to his parents' house to apologize to Aurora. She was at home, and this time around Jacob refused to let her step out as usual. Stephan was the first to talk, and when he apologized to her, she acted tough at first, but she eventually listened to him and forgave him. I also apologized, but all she did was nod and pat me on the back while she hugged Stephan. I didn't have any issues with that. So far, everybody was back on the same page. Like I expected, Stephan's countenance brightened up that night, and even when we got home, he could not stop talking about the wedding and his parents in excitement. Aurora agreed to come to the wedding and our pre-wedding party, which was the next day. The party was not a big one. It was just a gathering of close friends and family, and some of my friends who were also Chinese were going to be in attendance. On D-Day, Aurora came in looking so pretty. She wore a red featherly dress and had makeup on. On my end, I dressed so simply and did not even apply makeup. Already, Stephan and I were expecting a total of 50 guests at the pre-wedding party, and it was something we already told Stephan and Jacob. To our greatest surprise, Aurora came with 7 of her friends before the party began, and 4 others joined after the party started, and we did not even make any reservations for the extra 11 people. I didn't want to get upset, and Stephan didn't say anything either. We had to pay for extra food and drinks since we were using a restaurant. When it was time for Aurora to give her speech as the mother of the groom, she actually insisted that she wanted to speak, by the way. She starts cracking jokes about Chinese people, and everybody laughed, especially her 11 friends. To be more specific, she came with a note that she had written, and she publicly mocked my English accent and tradition in front of everyone. As if all of that wasn't enough, she called me a third world illiterate. The most annoying part was that her friends were cheering her on, and after she was done talking, she walked to me and kissed me on the cheek as if she hadn't said anything. I'm so upset right now. I've never been humiliated like that in my whole life. My other Chinese friends who were in the venue felt so embarrassed, and they've been talking about it in our group chat. Honestly, Aurora's drawn the battle line, and I cannot let this slide. What can I do to pay her back and give her a taste of her own medicine? Even Stephan and Jacob were so mad at Aurora and insisting that she did not say anything wrong, and she isn't showing any remorse. 4 hours ago, I gave Aurora a piece of my mind. At our wedding reception, I asked to make a speech from my new mother-in-law, and even Stephan was surprised. I carried the note that I've written, and I started cracking jokes just like Aurora did. Then slowly I started telling everybody how much of a racist she was. Everybody was shocked to hear that, especially with all the nice display of affection Aurora has been showing, right? On our wedding day alone, she tried to arrange my gown, kissed me on the cheek twice, and pretended like everything was perfect between us. Meanwhile, nothing was okay, and I knew she did not like me, and she was only making a show for everyone. After I made the speech, I felt so fulfilled, and everybody started avoiding her at the wedding. Funnily enough, when I made this speech, I spoke in very good English, and I'm sure she never expected to hear me speak like that. The only reason I spoke with my Chinese accent was because I loved it. It didn't mean I couldn't speak fluent and good English if I wanted to. I knew it was a slap on her face, and I didn't even notice when she left the wedding reception. Just yesterday morning, I was at home when I heard a very loud bang on our door, and when I went to check who it was Aurora. Immediately, I opened the door and she pushed me aside and started shouting inside the house. She said something about me posting a video online that went viral and I had no idea about it. Thank goodness, Stephan was home too, and he was there to handle his mother. Since I'm not really a social media person, I did not get to see the video, but Stephan had seen it. He didn't tell me because he knew it would hurt my feelings. I turned out that after I made the speech at the wedding, Aurora went behind my back to say several racist things about me, and one of the invitees recorded her and posted it online for the whole world to see, and she believed I was the one who did it. Long story short, she kept yelling and even made a scene outside that Stephan had to call the police to escort her off the property. And even the neighbors had come out to see what was going on. She ended up being so embarrassed and lost face in the neighborhood. This morning, I woke up to several missed calls from her, and she has been begging me to talk to Jacob. It turned out that her marriage was in a vulnerable position now because Jacob had enough of her. He viewed the video and heard about her antics at our house. He's currently ignoring her after being humiliated and upset by her remarks during the party. One of Jacob's guests at the wedding was a Chinese descent gentleman, whom he'd known since high school, an old buddy. When Aurora branded Chinese people the third world illiterates, the man felt so insulted and departed the party right away. Meanwhile, Stephan and I had cut all ties with her, and right now she is nobody. He doesn't want anything to do with her since she cannot accept me as her daughter-in-law. As for me, I think it's better she's out of our lives for good. She can sort out her issues with her husband. I don't want to make the same mistake twice. She's been calling and texting me to forgive her, but I've blocked her contact. Thank you guys so much for the comments and suggestions. You've all been the best. I mean, I don't know what Aurora was planning to do, was thinking to do, what was going on in her mind. Obviously, everyone's going to cut contact eventually, and I'm surprised that it took Aurora's son, aka OP's significant other, so long before he cut ties with his mother. She was very evil, toxic, racist, you name it. She tried to ruin the relationship between OP and her significant other, and it was so toxic. I'm glad that Aurora was essentially cut off from the family, and thank goodness the father-in-law and today's story was nowhere close to as evil. He was actually very, very down to earth. Let me know your thoughts about this story, what you would do if you had a mother-in-law on this level of crazy. Drop your comments down below. Thank you for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every day. If you want daily videos, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow. Just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.